How is everybody today?
Awake and ready.
Yay. It's our joy to be here with all of you. For those of you who don't know us, I see some new faces. Welcome. My name is Nayaswami Gangamata. This is my husband, Nayaswami Daiva. And again, it's our joy to be here. I wanted to start, since one of our topics is faith, I wanted to start by reading something that I found in a Woman's Day magazine a couple of years ago. I kept it, waiting for this topic to come. There are two quotes. The first one is from Martin Luther King. Faith is taking the first step, even when you don't see the whole staircase. And then the next quote is from Mother Teresa. I know God will not give me anything I can't handle. I just wish that He didn't trust me so much. Aren't those beautiful? And then I have another one that I'll share at the end. But we'll both be sharing in the topic this morning. We also want to welcome our Raja Yoga students. We have our flagship courses, The Art and Science of Raja Yoga. It's a 14-class series, and one of the classes is a Sunday. So we get to come together and share a Sunday service. There's a beautiful story, an example of faith in Yogananda's book, The Autobiography of a Yogi, and it's towards the end of the book. It's the chapter titled, I Go to America. Yogananda in a meditation had a vision, and he saw many Western faces, and he knew immediately that he was to go to the West and share these teachings of self-realization. And you would think, here he's doing this great thing, sharing the teachings. He had to still have a lot of faith in this journey he was about to take. He had to overcome a lot of obstacles. He didn't have any money for the trip when he first started looking at taking this trip. He was hoping his father would contribute. He didn't initially, but then later on his father said, I give you money for this trip, not as your father, but as a disciple of Lahiri Mahashaya. Lahiri Mahashaya was Yogananda's guru, Sri Yukteswar's guru. And then after getting the money, then he goes to get a passage onto the boat, because that's how he was going to travel. This was the 1920s. And at first he was told there's no room on the boat. But again, Yogananda knew, because this was a mission that he was given to come to the West. He knew that eventually he would find passage, and sure enough he did. And then also he was coming to Boston to speak at a congress on spiritual matters. And there he found himself, and go back and read this chapter. It's wonderful. It's just very inspiring. But there he is. He's on this boat. The other guests on the boat, they know that he's coming to America to speak again on spiritual matters, and they ask him to speak. And he gets up in front of people, and it must have been a room on the boat, and he finds himself for like 5 minutes. He's silent because he didn't know how to speak English. And he's just standing there. And you can only imagine, 1920s, he was probably quite a sight. He had long black hair, and he wore the traditional orange robes. And there he is waiting for Divine Mother to speak through him and teach him how to speak English. And sure enough, he said, this is why the masters are sending me. This is why my guru's guru, Lahiri Mahashaya, is sending me to spread these teachings. And then he found that he spoke. And he spoke eloquently, apparently, for, I don't know, I think it says in the book 45 minutes or an hour. And afterwards, he didn't know what he said. And that often happens to us after we get up here. We're like, what did we say? But he didn't know. But many came up to him afterwards and said, you spoke so beautifully, so eloquently on spiritual matters. And it's such a beautiful example. Our reading this morning also that Pat read is also very inspiring. There was a line that she read that I wanted to reread. It said, right in the middle, faith is the attractive power of our underlying state of consciousness. It's a wonderful thing to remember. There was a substitute Sunday school teacher who was trying to get into the supply cabinet, but it had one of those combination locks, and she had forgotten the code. So she went to the pastor and she said, could you help me get into this supply cabinet? So he comes over and he stares just kind of straight ahead, and he dials the first 2 numbers. And then his eyes go, heavenward, upward, and his mouth moves silently. And then he dials the next 2 numbers, and bingo, he opens the lock. And the substitute Sunday school teacher said, "Wow, Pastor, I am really in awe of your faith." And he said, "Oh, it's really nothing. The combination is written on a piece of tape on the ceiling." We don't always need to know the combination, but we need to have the faith that we will learn the combination. And then what's our other topic, as Diva mentioned, the willingness. We need to have the willingness. This is how I was thinking. This is very much how Ananda has been built. For those of you who don't know, Ananda started over 40 years ago in Northern California. It's by people who were willing, people who had the faith, people who were willing to attune themselves to the teachings and create something out of nothing. And often the tasks that people were given or the tasks that they were taken on, they had no experience in them. When I first moved to Ananda Village back in 1991, I was tested right away on my willingness. Many of you know I grew up in New York City, and then once I moved to California in 1985, I had graduated from college. I embarked on my career. I had a business major. And I worked and lived in San Francisco. So I got this great job in an advertising company, really was advancing in my career, eventually ended up in human resources. I really just prided myself on my corporate experience. And then here I was moving to Ananda Village. Ananda Village is in the foothills of the Sierras. It's in between San Francisco and Lake Tahoe, just north of Sacramento. And I was moving to Ananda Village because I wanted to deepen my attunement. I wanted to deepen my spiritual life. And so here I am moving to Ananda Village. Ananda Village is about a half hour outside of a small town called Nevada City. And it was hard for me to give up my life in San Francisco. As many of you know, I'm a city girl. San Francisco was a great stepping stone from New York City, but I still had a lot wrapped up in that. My ego, my love, my desires was the city and the corporate world. And here I am, I moved to the village, and I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to get to incubate there, and work there. There's businesses on the land there. It's about 900 acres. The first job that they asked me to do was to go into town and work in a shop called Mountain Song. It was a retail store. It was a women's apparel and gift item store. And I was appalled. I was like, work in retail? I've never worked in retail. I have experience. I have background in corporate. I was a corporate person. What do I know about retail except that I was a good shopper? And so I thought, well, okay. I was tested again in my willingness. And those of you know, John's here. When you work in retail, you often work all the holidays, all the events. So here I just moved to Ananda Village to experience the teachings, experience living and working in the same place. And we were about to go into the holidays, and I worked the whole time. And I remember somebody said, "Isn't it wonderful living at Ananda during the holidays?" And I said, "How would I know? As I'm in retail now." But I found by that willingness, now I made the initial gesture. I said, okay, yes, I'm going to go work there. But then I had to work on my willingness every single day, because I didn't want to have to drive into town for a half hour and leave the land. Every day I had to keep working on that willingness. I had to stay open and have the faith that there was something for me in town through this experience. And I found by being willing, being open, I started to feel a joy. It ended up becoming my most favorite job I've ever had up to that point. I was like, oh, and I hadn't realized there were certain desires that were coming up. You know how sometimes you don't know you have these desires, and sometimes they're very clear. Growing up on the East Coast, I always knew I wanted to do three things. I wanted to live on the West Coast, go to Hawaii, and have a red car. I had done all those things. But then there were other desires that started to surface, because here I was working in a little town, a little business where I knew everybody in the town, and I thought, I had always wanted to know what this felt like. Growing up in New York City, you didn't know your neighbors, much less who lived above or below you. But here all of a sudden I was working in a little town in Nevada City. We'd all meet for coffee across the street. We all got to know each other. All the shop owners, we all worked really cooperatively. And through the years, I found that there was this joy and energy that I had because I was willing to say yes. And then, wouldn't you know, the story just comes around because I was there about 5 years. Towards the last 2 or 3 years, I was put in a managerial role at the shop. And what that meant was one of my new jobs was to go and do the buying for the shop. So we had women's apparel, Christmas items, gift items, many of the things we have here. And now all of a sudden I had to go to San Francisco about 8 times a year. And so I was like perfect for the job. I knew the city, I knew how to get around. And so here it is, Divine Mother. She knows what we love. She knows what brings us joy. She won't hold anything back from us. But if we have the willingness and the faith, if I had said, no, I can't do this experience, I don't want to do this, I would have missed this whole opportunity that I had. And then the words from the Gita, again, that the reading is so beautiful. Cling thou to me, clasp me with heart and mind. They're such beautiful words. And at the same time, they're so intimidating, aren't they? Because at first, I didn't know when I first heard those words, how do I do that? Because we are so enmeshed in the world. We love the things of the world. We love our job in San Francisco or whatever it is. There was a woman who had died and suddenly gone to heaven, and God said, you know, you weren't supposed to die yet. I'm going to send you back. You still have another 20 years. And so as soon as she got back to earth, she proceeded to just change a lot of things about herself. Probably changed her hair color, I don't know, facelift, tummy tuck, whatever. She just went for the works. And then unfortunately, as soon as she stepped out of the facility, she ends up getting hit by a bus and she dies again. And so she's sent back up to heaven and she says, God, I thought I still had 20 years left. And God said, well, I didn't recognize you. Why do we come to the path? It's usually because we're looking for something else. But we put our faith in the things of the world because that's what we know. Whether it's our job in San Francisco, whatever it is, we put our faith in those things, that's what we know. But again, in this reading, God is calling to us, clasp me with heart and mind. And who is me? Who is God? God is joy, love, peace, all those qualities. And how do we experience Him? In meditation, that second chant that we did. It's in the silence, be still and know. That's when we can experience who He really is. And then we take that experience, and from it we find what? That we have that willingness. We have that faith. We have that energy and joy, and we can start to see that life starts to flow from that inner experience. And then it's so beautiful, because even if we can't get it right, even if we say, no, I'm not going to take that job in retail, I'm just going to do the best I can, and I'm going to stick with what I've got. What does He say then? Those beautiful words. But if this thy faint heart fails, bring me thy failure. It's almost like we can't lose. Bring me thy failure. What a beautiful reminder. It doesn't give us a hall pass to not try, not to be willing, not to have the faith, not to do our meditation. But again, if we do our meditation, we do our practices, we'll find in those moments we start to become changed. Yogananda always promised us it's in the moments that we change, in the moments. We think it's got to be that big job again that we're saying no or yes to. But it's in those moments. Am I being willing right now in my attitude, in the love? Am I projecting love? All those qualities, but again, in the moment. But if thy faint heart fails, bring me thy failure, remembering that. I think I'll end so Daiva can speak too, but this is another quote I found, and I don't know who wrote this. This is anonymous. But it says, do not pray for an easy life. Pray for greater strength. Do not pray for tasks equal to your powers. Pray for powers equal to your tasks. Then the doing of your work shall be no miracle, but you will be a miracle. Every day you will wonder at yourself, at the richness of the life that has come to you by the grace of God. Faith is walking to the edge of all you have and taking one more step. Bless you all.
Ananda Portland and Laurelwood has just come through a fairly intense period of testing, and some of you were
exempt from the experience, but many of you were not. And many of us were not. And I wanted to talk about do each according to his faith, and also about willingness. When we come to the path, we have an intuitive understanding of what it will probably feel like when we are spiritually awakened. We all know, again, intuitively, what it is that we're trying to reclaim: the joy, the freedom, the spiritual power, the wisdom, the peace and calmness. But unless we're already awakened, it's like you can see the top of Mount Everest, but unless we've already climbed the mountain, we have no real idea of what that path really looks like, what it takes to become awakened. There's a story in the scriptures of I've got 3 stories. I'll try and make them really brief because I don't want to take too much away from what Ganga Mata has already said. It's so powerful and so beautiful. But I do feel like it's timely to address this concept of understanding how the path really works. There's a story from the scriptures of a saint in India. And he was a really grouchy guy. And he used to throw stones at his disciples. And they would run from him whenever he got in a mood. They would run from him in fear of getting hit by the stones. But there was a disciple who refused to be intimidated, and he would pick up those stones and he would take them home. And he found invariably every time when and he would place them on the altar because they were from his guru, they were from his teacher, and every time he found in the morning that they had turned into gold. We think that the path is supposed to be comfortable and easy and just the way we want it. But if life was going to, if that's how it worked, we would already be free, because we tend to avoid the things that we really need to do, the things that we really need in order to awaken. There's one of the greatest saints in Tibetan Buddhism is a saint named Milarepa. And the story is well worth telling. It's probably worth spending a few hours in an evening telling, because it's a marvelous story. But the shortened version, the Reader's Digest version, is that as a young man, his family had been quite troubled and beset by neighbors in really dark and inappropriate ways. And he went out and he developed magical powers. He developed spiritual powers, and he used them to curse all those who were working against him. And even as he did it, I mean, he caused great damage and pain and death to those who had crossed his family's path. And he knew inside it wasn't right, and he went to find redemption. He knew that this kind of experience he couldn't live with. And he finally found his guru, Marpa, and he went to him, and what his process of awakening was, Marpa was teaching all these great yogic teachings to all these disciples that would come. And Milarepa said, "Will you teach me?" And he said, "Yes, I will." But then he had him go out and he had him build this really extensive tower on a mountain out of stone. This is back in the Dark Ages, Stone Age. And he had him build this huge tower, and then in a fit of rage he said, "That's not the mountain I told you to build it on. Take all those stones down and take them back and put them where you found them. I want you to build it over here." And so he had him build another one. And these are enormous edifices. These are huge things. And as soon as that was done, he made him take that one down and redistribute everything from where he found it. And he told him, no, that's not what I asked you to build. It was supposed to be over here. And he had him build a third one. And this is taking years. This is not like a good weekend project. This is years of self-offering and huge tapasya, huge effort. And that one had to come down. And finally he says, "No, this is what I want you to build." And he gave him the description of a 4th tower, 9 stories tall, with a 10th story completion. And as Milarepa was laying the foundation on this mountaintop for this 9-story huge edifice that he's going to build, a couple of other yogic friends of his came by, and they decided to help him, and they brought this enormous boulder and he planted it into the foundation. And he built the building, he built this tower. And just as he's getting around the 7th floor, this is a 9-story, 10-story, but 9 stories of building and a 10th story of this top dressing. As he's getting through the 7th floor, Marpa comes up, his guru comes up and walks over and says, "Where did this stone come from?" And Milarepa tells him the story of the friends, and he says, "I asked you to build this." And he makes him take everything down, take the stone back to where it was, and then bring it up himself and replant it and place it. All this time, this is years, people are coming and getting discipleship, getting taught the different practices. And all he does is put these enormous buildings up and tear them down and move them around. And his despair is beginning to overwhelm him because this isn't what he thought he came for. And so he finally gets it completed. And still he doesn't get the initiation. Still he is deprived of the things. And finally, it gets convoluted, but finally, despair so overwhelms him that he leaves. He tries to leave. He gets coddled by the wife of. He gets coddled by the wife of his guru, and again this teaching comes in a back door, and finally Marpa says, if you had not given in to this, if you had been able to endure one more time, one more step, all of this karma, all of this darkness, all of this residual heaviness in your nature would have been washed away and you would have achieved enlightenment. But now what you have to do is, because there's still vestiges, you didn't stay with it, you left. It didn't get out of your system. See, it's not the teachings, it's our system, it's our commitment. It's our contraction and holding on to these things that are limiting, that keep us from having the experience we're seeking. And the tapasyas, the difficulties of the path, the testings that come, they're there for our blessing to give us the chance to outgrow those limitations. And if it was easy, we'd all be liberated. The whole world would be liberated. It's very, very hard. And it takes tremendous faith and tremendous courage to walk through those times of great testing. And so then he ends up going in for 12 years. He spends time living in a cave, living on nettles. So much so that his skin became green from just living on nettle broth. We are so sincere in this group. Ananda, the people who are part of Ananda Portland and Laurelwood have such a tremendous depth of yearning for God's wholeness and love of truth and beauty and goodness and a profound desire to be pure and open channels, both for our own benefit and for the benefit of this world. But we cannot get there if we run, if we back away, if we allow the tests that purify us to overwhelm us. There's another story, and again, this is real brief and we'll stop. A man came to his guru as a young man. And again, his guru had him go and chop wood and bring it for the sacred fire. And year after year after year, that was what he was asked to do. And in the meantime, again, all these other souls would come and they'd get initiation, they'd sit by the fire, they'd get taken care of, and they'd go away. And just year after year after year, all his guru had him do was bring wood for the fire. And many, many, many years after he came, he was hauling wood one more time, and as he dropped the load, some of his hair got caught and pulled out, and he looked down and it was white. And he realized that he had spent his entire life just carrying wood for the fire. And again, this despair overwhelmed him. This despair overwhelmed his heart. Because he felt, all these souls had come and gotten initiation, and all he'd ever been allowed to do, all he'd ever done was just carry wood for the fire. And a tear started to run down his cheek, and his guru appeared and saw this, and immediately ran over with a leaf and caught the tear. And he said, "My son, don't you understand that if even a single tear from someone as great as you was allowed to touch this earth, for every teardrop there would be 7 years of famine and 7 years of drought. We don't know how it works. We don't know how it works. What we have to start to do is we have to start to open our hearts in faith that the things that are brought to us are not a mistake. That the things that are put in front of us are ours to embrace, ours to open to, ours to step into. One step past. What was that? One step past what we think we can do. Mm-hmm. In trust, in loyalty. Because God knows what it takes to empty our hearts of all the things that keep us from the experience of the joy and the love that we would have be our only reality. It takes tremendous courage. And you're not expected, Asha once said in a variation on this reading today, you know, cling to me, hold on to me, and if you can't do that, worship me, and if you can't do that, even if in that thy faint heart faileth, bring me your failure. She said, we're not expected to run across the finish line into samadhi. She says, we're not even expected necessarily to walk across. If we can even keep crawling, just anything that moves us forward, that's all that's needed. We'll end with this. O mighty mystic judge of life, I ask thee, in the hall of soul stillness, what is sin? And thy whispers of silence, dim at first, grew into a bright articulation of thought. I heard and understood thy meaning. Sin is a rebel king. His name is ignorance. Ignorance is the perpetrator of all evil, the main root of the tree of ill health, the primal cause of all error and soul blindness. King Ignorance and his army of bacteria, physical disease, mental desires, dullness and false ambition, spiritual indifference to high truths, have been devastating the nourishing harvest fields of spirituality. That harvest of countless fulfillments was ripe for reaping when the harsh tread of error trampled it to the ground. I wanted to weep with despair when I heard thy voice whispering to me in my soul. The sun of my protection shines on thee always, equally on the sunny days and on thy coal-black nocturnal hours. Thou shouldst always have faith in me and smile, for the greatest of all sins against me is not to be happy. Let the ripples of unceasing smiles play over thy face. Through their transparency, my light will come to thine assistance. By smiling with determined happiness, thou wilt always please me. Moment of silence.